I started cheating on my husband with his friend, but I accidentally got pregnant by him. I don't know when exactly it all started. Maybe it was the night my husband David came home late from work for the 100th time, barely acknowledging me before heading straight to bed. Or maybe it was when I realized that I could count the number of times we'd had sex in the past year on one hand. At some point, I stopped waiting for him to notice me, and that's when Ethan did. Ethan had been David's best friend since college. The guy was always around barbecues, game nights, birthdays, you name it. He was easygoing, the kind of man who could make anyone laugh. Unlike David, he actually listened when I talked, actually saw me. He wasn't just polite, he was interested. At first, I thought I was imagining things. The lingering glances, the way his eyes traced my body when he thought no one was looking, the way his fingers would brush against mine when he handed me a drink, just barely too long to be accidental. I told myself it was nothing, that I was just reading too much into it. But then, it became something. It started off innocent enough. A few drinks during a party at our house, Ethan joking about how I was wasting away married to a man who barely looked up from his phone. I laughed, rolled my eyes, but deep down his words hit a nerve. David wasn't a bad husband, not in the way that people usually mean when they say that. He didn't cheat on me, he didn't hit me, he wasn't cruel. He was just absent. Work was his mistress, and I had long since accepted that I came second, maybe third, in his list of priorities. I told myself I was fine with it, that this was just how marriages went after a while. And then, there was that night. David had left for a business trip, and Ethan came over to help fix a leaky pipe in the kitchen. It was late. We were drinking, and at some point, the air got heavy, charged with something neither of us wanted to name. "You know, you deserve more than this," Ethan murmured, his voice low, fingers brushing against mine as he handed me my glass of wine. I should have pulled away. I should have told him to leave, but I didn't. Instead, I let his lips crash into mine. And just like that, the line between friendship and betrayal vanished. It wasn't slow, it wasn't romantic, it was desperate. The kind of desperate that comes from months, maybe years, of longing for something you know you shouldn't want. We barely made it to the bedroom before we were tearing at each other's clothes. I remember the feeling of his hands, rough and eager, roaming my body like he'd been dying to touch me for years. "Fuck, I've wanted this for so long," he groaned against my skin, his voice thick with lust. And the worst part? I believed him. Maybe that's why I let it happen again. And again. At first, I told myself it was just sex. A release. A mistake, even. But every time David came home late, every time he barely looked at me before falling asleep next to me like a stranger, Ethan was there, waiting. And I let him. I told myself it wasn't love. I told myself it wouldn't last. I had no fucking idea how wrong I was. Cheating is like playing with fire. You tell yourself you're careful, that you can control it, but eventually the flames get too high, and you either burn or get caught in the smoke. I should have stopped after that first time. I should have come to my senses, realized what the fuck I was doing, but I didn't. Because Ethan made me feel alive. It started happening more and more. Anytime David was away, I found myself texting Ethan, making up reasons for him to come over. A broken cabinet, a stuck window, even just asking if he wanted to grab a drink. And every time, we ended up in bed. It was always rough, desperate. Like we both knew we were running out of time, that at any moment, this thing could blow up in our faces. And maybe that was part of the thrill, the risk. The knowledge that one wrong move, one careless moment, and it could all come crashing down. But the fucked up part? I started to need him. Not just the sex. The way he looked at me like I was the only woman in the world. The way he made me laugh. The way he actually listened to me. With Ethan, I wasn't just David's wife. I was me. And the more I let myself fall into him, the more I started resenting my husband. One night, David came home late again. I was sitting on the couch, pretending to watch television, but really, I was thinking about Ethan, about the way his hands had been on me just a few hours earlier. "Hey," David muttered, dropping his bag on the floor. He looked exhausted, but not in a way that made me feel sorry for him, just tired of everything. Tired of me. "Hey," I said back. He didn't even kiss me, just sighed and went straight to the bedroom. And I hated him for it. I hated him for making this so easy, for making it so I didn't even feel guilty anymore. The affair went on for months. We got better at hiding it, at making sure no one suspected a thing. I learned to clear my messages, to keep my face neutral when Ethan's name popped up on my phone. We stopped meeting at my house. Too risky. Instead, we used hotels, his apartment, anywhere we could be alone. It was perfect. Until I missed my period. At first, I didn't panic. My cycle had been irregular before, nothing unusual. But then another week passed, and another. And suddenly, I was standing in the bathroom, staring down at a fucking pregnancy test with 2 pink lines. I couldn't breathe. I felt like I was going to throw up, but that could have just been the morning sickness. My hands were shaking so badly I had to grab the edge of the sink to keep myself steady. This wasn't happening. It couldn't be happening. I counted the dates again, hoping, praying that maybe, just maybe, it could be David's. But it wasn't. It was Ethan's. And that's when the real panic set in. Because what the fuck was I supposed to do now? I couldn't tell David. That wasn't even an option. And Ethan? I didn't even know how he'd react. Would he want me to keep it? Would he tell me to get rid of it? Would he even care? For the first time since this whole thing started, I felt truly, completely alone. I spent days trying to figure out what to do, barely sleeping, barely eating. I thought about abortion, just getting rid of the problem before it became a real one. But every time I even considered it, something in me hesitated. Maybe it was guilt. Maybe it was fear. Or maybe it was because, deep down, I knew this wasn't just a mistake anymore. This was real. And no matter what I did, there was no way to stop the inevitable. I was going to have this baby. And somehow, I had to keep my husband from finding out it wasn't his. The moment I realized I was keeping the baby, I knew my life would never be the same. I had no idea how I was going to do it, how I was going to look David in the eyes every day, knowing I was carrying another man's child. But I couldn't back out now. The first few weeks were hell. I was constantly on edge, terrified I would slip up. I started making up excuses for my mood swings and the nausea, blaming stress or bad food. David barely noticed. He was always working late, always exhausted. If anything, he seemed relieved that I wasn't nagging him about our non-existent sex life. I told myself I could do this. I told myself I could pull it off. But the first real problem came when Ethan noticed. It happened on a random Tuesday. We hadn't seen each other in almost 2 weeks, too risky, with David's schedule being unpredictable. But I knew I had to talk to him. I had to tell him whether I wanted to or not. We met at his apartment, like we always did. He kissed me the second I walked in, like he couldn't wait to have me. And for a second, I let myself forget. I let myself fall into him the way I always did, until he pulled back, his brows furrowing. "You okay?" he asked, brushing a strand of hair from my face. I hesitated. "Yeah, just tired." He didn't buy it. His eyes scanned me, and I saw the exact moment he knew. His gaze dropped to my stomach. "What's going on, Anna?" I swallowed hard, my throat dry as hell. I couldn't say it. The words got stuck, and for the first time, I realized how fucking real this was. This wasn't just sneaking around behind my husband's back. This wasn't just a fling anymore. This was a baby. Ethan took a step back, running a hand through his hair. "Fuck! Tell me it's not!" I couldn't even answer. He let out a humorless laugh, shaking his head. "Jesus Christ, Anna. I don't know what to do," I whispered. He exhaled sharply, pacing the room. "Does David know?" "Number. And he's not going to." Ethan froze. "What?" I straightened my shoulders, trying to sound more confident than I felt. "I'm going to tell him it's his." His eyes darkened. "Are you fucking serious? What else am I supposed to do, Ethan? You want me to destroy my marriage? Ruin my entire life? Number, it's better this way." He let out another bitter laugh. "Yeah? And what about me? You think I'm just gonna sit back and let you raise my kid with another man?" I bit my lip, my heart racing. "You don't have to be involved." His expression turned cold. "Wow, just like that, huh? You're just gonna pretend this never happened?" I knew it was fucked up. I knew, but I didn't see any other choice. "This is my decision," I said firmly. "I need you to let me do this." Ethan stared at me for a long time, jaw clenched, breathing heavy. Then, without another word, he grabbed his jacket and stormed out. I didn't go after him. I just stood there, staring at the door, knowing I had just crossed a line I could never uncross. For a while, things seemed to be going smoothly. I played my role perfect, smiling when I needed to, faking excitement, making sure David never suspected a thing. When I told him I was pregnant, he actually lit up. I hadn't seen that look on his face in years. "Are you serious?" he asked, eyes wide, voice full of something I barely recognized, happiness. I forced myself to smile, nodding. "Yeah, we're having a baby." He pulled me into his arms, laughing. I can't believe it. And just like that, the guilt nearly crushed me. I told myself it didn't matter, that David would be a great father, that he didn't need to know the truth. But every time he kissed my stomach, every time he talked about our future, my stomach twisted into knots. And then there was Ethan. He changed after that night. He stopped answering my calls, stopped showing up to our usual gatherings. I barely even saw him anymore, and when I did, he wouldn't even look at me. And I thought that was it, that he was going to let me have this. But then, at a family dinner, everything started falling apart. It was a casual evening, just me, David, and a few close friends, including Ethan. I had been dreading seeing him, but I forced myself to act normal. Everything was fine, until David, completely oblivious, started talking about the baby. "I swear, I can't wait to see if they get Anna's eyes or mine," he joked, taking a sip of his drink. Ethan went pale. I saw his grip tighten around his fork, his jaw clenching. "Yeah," he muttered. "That'll be interesting to see." I shot him a warning glance, but he didn't even look at me. David chuckled, shaking his head. "Man, I still can't believe I'm gonna be a dad. Feels surreal." Ethan's lips curled into something that wasn't quite a smile. "Yeah, surreal." And that was when I knew Ethan wasn't going to stay silent. He wasn't going to let this go. And I had no idea what the fuck I was going to do about it. I couldn't focus on anything after that dinner. Every conversation, every moment spent with David felt like a ticking time bomb, and I had no idea when Ethan was going to light the fuse. Days passed, then a week. I kept waiting for the worst, for some sign that he was going to tell David. But instead, he did something even worse. He made me sweat. He didn't say a damn word, but his presence alone was enough to unnerve me. Anytime we were in the same room, I felt his eyes on me, watching, waiting. It was like he was testing me, seeing how long I could keep up the lie before I cracked. And it was working. David, of course, was oblivious. He was too caught up in the excitement of becoming a dad, of planning for a future that wasn't real. Every day, he talked about baby names, nursery themes, even suggested taking time off work to be around more. "You were right," he told me one night, running his hand over my barely there baby bump. "I've been distant. I don't want to be that guy anymore." My throat closed up, because it was too fucking late. I forced a smile, nodding. "I appreciate that." I wanted to scream, wanted to tell him to stop making it so fucking hard to lie to him, but I couldn't. Instead, I went to bed beside him, knowing that everything was hanging by a thread. I should have known Ethan wouldn't stay silent forever. One evening, I got a text from him. "We need to talk." I ignored it. Another message came a few minutes later. "Either we talk, or I talk to David. Your choice." Panic shot through me. I couldn't let that happen. I told David I needed to run an errand, and drove to Ethan's apartment, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tight my knuckles turned white. When I got there, he was already waiting for me, leaning against his doorframe with that same unreadable expression he'd worn at dinner. "Glad you finally decided to show up," he said coolly. I pushed past him into the apartment, slamming the door behind me. "What the hell do you want?" He raised an eyebrow. "You really have to ask?" I crossed my arms, trying to keep my voice steady. "I told you I'm handling it." "Yeah?" He stepped closer, eyes dark. "Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you're just lying your ass off and hoping no one figures it out." I swallowed hard. "Ethan, please, just let this go." His jaw clenched. "Let it go? You're carrying my child, Anna, and you expect me to just sit back and watch you raise it with someone else? Fuck no." A lump formed in my throat. "What do you want me to do? Tell David and blow up thing?" You think that's better? I think the truth is better, he shot back. Or are you so deep in your lies that you actually believe them now? I exhaled sharply, shaking my head. I can't do this right now. But as I turned to leave, he grabbed my wrist not hard, but enough to make me stop. You don't get to just walk away from this, he said, voice lower now, almost pleading. This isn't just about you anymore. I looked at him, really looked at him, and for the first time, I saw the hurt beneath the anger. I had fucked this up beyond repair. I need time, I whispered. Ethan let go of my wrist, stepping back. You're running out of it. And for the first time, I knew he was right. The moment I walked back into my house that night, I knew something was wrong. David was sitting in the living room, his face unreadable, his phone in his hand. The second he looked at me, my stomach dropped. Where were you? He asked. I forced myself to stay calm. Just ran out for something. Yeah? He held up his phone. Then why did Ethan just call me? Every nerve in my body went ice cold. I tried to play dumb. I don't know. Maybe you should ask him. David's jaw tightened. He sounded off. Said he needed to talk to me about something important. I swallowed, my heart slamming against my ribs. Did he say what it was? Number. David leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. But I get the feeling it's about you. My entire body tensed. This was it. The moment I had been dreading. I had two choices: keep lying and hope I could somehow talk my way out of this, or finally tell the truth. Either way, everything was about to fall apart, and I wasn't sure I was ready for it. My mind raced as I stood there, staring at David, trying to piece together a response that wouldn't send everything crashing down. Maybe he's just messing with you, I said, forcing a laugh that sounded fake even to my own ears. You know how he is. David didn't laugh. Instead, he kept staring, his jaw tight, his fingers gripping his phone like he was holding himself back from something. He didn't sound like he was joking, he said, his voice eerily calm. He sounded serious, almost angry. I felt my stomach twist. Did Ethan already tell him? Was this it? Was everything already over? I sat down on the couch across from him, keeping my hands in my lap so he wouldn't see how badly they were shaking. What exactly did he say? David sighed, rubbing a hand over his face. Not much. Just that we needed to talk. That there was something important I needed to know. He finally looked up at me, his eyes sharp. Something about you. My breath caught. This was it. The walls were closing in. I swallowed hard, trying to sound casual. Well, I don't know what he's talking about. David watched me for a long time, his gaze searching. And for a moment, I thought maybe, just maybe, I could still get out of this. Maybe Ethan hadn't told him yet. Maybe I could get to him first, convince him to keep his mouth shut. Then David said something that made my heart stop. I told him to come over. Panic shot through me like a lightning bolt. What? He's on his way. I felt like I was going to throw up. I jumped to my feet, my heart pounding in my chest. David, two don't know what he's trying to do, but I don't think you should listen to him. His eyes narrowed. Why? Got something to hide? Shit. Shit, shit, shit. I had to stop this. I had to do something before Ethan got here and ripped my entire life apart. I grabbed David's hand, forcing him to look at me. Can't we just not do this? I whispered. Please? David frowned, confused. Anna, what the hell is going on? Before I could answer, a knock sounded at the door. I froze. David stood up, brushing past me. Guess we're about to find out. My chest tightened as he walked to the door and pulled it open. And there stood Ethan. The second I saw him, I knew he was going to tell David everything. His face was tense, his expression unreadable, but his eyes told me this was it. David stepped aside, letting him in. All right, man. I'm here. What's so important? Ethan didn't answer right away. He walked inside, his gaze flickering to me for just a second before locking onto David. We need to talk. David folded his arms. So talk. Ethan exhaled, then looked directly at me. You want to tell him, or should I? My entire body went cold. David's brows furrowed, his confusion turning into something more dangerous. He glanced at me. Tell me what? I opened my mouth, but no words came out. I couldn't do it. I couldn't say the words. Ethan clenched his jaw, then turned back to David. Anna's pregnant, he said. David frowned. Yeah, I know that. Ethan took a deep breath. It's mine. The room went silent. For a second, I thought maybe I had imagined it, that maybe if I wished hard enough, the words would just disappear. But then I saw David's face change. His eyes went blank, his body completely still, like his brain was short-circuiting, like the words didn't compute. What? He finally said, his voice hollow. Ethan swallowed hard, but he didn't back down. The baby isn't yours, man. It's mine. David let out a short laugh like he thought it was a joke. That's not, he shook his head. That's not funny. Ethan didn't say anything. David turned to me, waiting for me to deny it, to call Ethan a liar, to tell him that everything was fine. But I couldn't, because it wasn't. And when I didn't say anything, that was when the truth really hit him. His face twisted, his entire body stiffening. Tell me he's lying, he demanded. Tell me this is some fucked up prank. I opened my mouth and closed it again. And that was enough. Something inside him broke. David exploded. Are you fucking kidding me? He roared, stepping toward me so fast I flinched. You fucking cheated on me? With him? He turned to Ethan, his face red with rage. With my best fucking friend! Ethan didn't back down. I didn't plan for this to happen, man. Oh, that makes it so much better, David shouted, his hands shaking. I stepped forward, reaching for him. David, please let me explain. Explain? He laughed, but there was no humor in it. Explain what? That you've been fucking him behind my back? That you let me believe this baby was mine? That you... His voice cracked. I had never seen him look so broken. He stepped back, running a hand through his hair, his breathing ragged. How long? I swallowed hard. David, how long, Anna? I hesitated. Then, barely above a whisper, months. David clenched his fists, his entire body shaking. Then, before I could react, punched Ethan in the face. I screamed as Ethan stumbled back, his lips split open. David, stop! David wasn't listening. He went after him again, tackling him against the wall. Ethan fought back, throwing a punch of his own. The two of them crashed into the coffee table, knocking over a lamp, grappling like animals. Fucking piece of shit, David roared, grabbing Ethan by the collar and shoving him back. You were my best friend! Blood dripped from Ethan's lip as he wiped it on the back of his hand. I never meant to hurt you, man. David laughed again. And this time, it was pure venom. You didn't just hurt me, he spat. You fucking ruined me. He turned to me then, and for the first time, I saw something worse than anger in his eyes. I saw hate. You, he said, his voice shaking, you're fucking dead to me. And just like that, everything fell apart.